Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing ankle-deep in a muddy lane in a medieval village with winter dusk settling over the fields like a grey wool blanket. Your boots are wet, your cloak smells of horse and rain, and river mist curls between the cottages. Beyond the hedges a monastery bell sounds the last light of day. Ahead, smoke leaks through thatch while a crooked oak door glows around its edges with the orange promise of fire. You have cold, stone, damp straw soot in the rafters, torchlight trembling in the wind, and the breath of tethered horses hanging white in the air. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. And if we are practical, you probably would not last a week out here without asking where the nearest heated room might be. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift one hand and knock on the oak door, though the sound is swallowed by the wind. The house is smaller than you expect, no grand hall or banners. It crouches close to the earth, its timber walls packed with wattle and daub patched where rain has worried at the surface. The thatch is uneven and dark with moisture. For a moment nothing happens, then a dog barks inside. It is not a heroic hound of legend. It sounds small, suspicious, and deeply offended by your existence. A bar scrapes. An iron latch lifts. The door opens just enough for a face to appear, lit from below by firelight. The man looking at you wears a coarse wool tunic and the expression of someone deciding whether you are a traveller, a thief, or one more problem sent by the weather. Hospitality matters here, especially after sunset, but caution matters too. A stranger can bring news, trade prayers, illness, debts, or trouble. Some swear that a household turning away a harmless traveller on a bitter night risks refusing a saint in disguise. Others seem to believe saints have enough sense not to wander muddy roads after dark. No one can quite agree whether these tales are religious warnings or simply clever arguments for sharing supper. You ask for shelter from the cold. The man studies the road behind you, then opens the door wider. Warmth reaches you first. Not clean warmth. This warmth carries wood smoke, boiled onions, damp wool, old straw, animal hair, stale ale, and the faint sourness of many bodies living closely together through winter. It wraps around you so quickly that your chilled face begins to sting. You duck beneath the low doorway. Smoke drifts in blue layers beneath soot-black rafters because there is no proper chimney, only openings through which it eventually escapes. A central hearth burns on packed earth and stone. Flames illuminate faces, baskets, tools, clay pots, and bundles of dried herbs hanging from pegs. An iron key hangs from the householder's wife's belt, large enough to look almost ceremonial. The floor is covered in rushes. Fresh rushes soften hard ground and absorb spills, but these are not entirely fresh. Beneath the upper layer lie crumbs, dust bits of wool, dried mud and whatever else has worked its way downward. Wealthier homes may replace them more often or scatter sweet herbs among them. Here they are changed when labour allows. Your boot sinks slightly. You decide not to investigate. The woman by the hearth gestures for your wet cloak. She hangs it on a peg where it can steam beside the fire. Water drips from the hem. Your boots leave dark marks on the floor, and your toes feel as if they belong to someone else. You stretch your hands toward the flames. Around you the household continues its evening. A young worker carries kindling. An older woman turns a spindle in the firelight. A man repairs a leather strap with an awl. Darkness does not mean idleness. Outside the village is disappearing. The last scraps of daylight fade from the shutter opening. Somewhere in the lane a cartwheel grinds through mud and stops. A voice calls once, then falls silent. The dog, having decided you are probably harmless, circles near the hearth and settles beside your boots. Rainwater drips from the eaves. Then the bell sounds again. Its slow note travels through walls and smoke, reminding you that time here is measured by bells, hunger prayer work, and changing light. In villages near a monastery or church, bells marking the hours of prayer become part clock, part memory, part background to ordinary life. The householder closes the door and lowers the wooden bar into place. That sound changes the room. The road fields, hedges, frozen ruts, and travellers still searching for shelter remain outside. Inside, the night belongs to the hearth. A beeswax candle burns near a shelf, clearly too precious to waste. Cheaper tallow lights can smoke and smell, while beeswax burns cleaner and brighter, often appearing in churches or wealthier homes. This little candle may have been saved from some better occasion. Its flame leans whenever a draught slips through the doorframe. The woman glances at it as though personally offended by the expense. You begin to understand that medieval darkness is not simply the absence of day. It is something people prepare for. Doors are secured, food is brought close, water is kept within reach, tools are put where they can be found again. Everyone draws nearer to the fire, every flame matters. The wind presses against the thatch, smoke shifts beneath the beams. Someone places a wooden bowl into your hands and steam rises from it. You have only crossed the threshold, yet the house already teaches you its rules. Stay close to warmth. Do not waste light. Do not leave the door open, and never underestimate how much mud one pair of boots can carry indoors. Outside, the bell fades into the mist. Inside, the fire settles lower, and the long medieval night quietly begins. The fire settles lower, but no one in the room treats that as a reason to relax. You watch the householder lean forward and push a half-burned log deeper into the glowing centre of the hearth. Sparks rise toward the rafters, briefly illuminating the heavy black soot above your head. For an instant, every beam appears polished with darkness. Then the sparks disappear, and the room returns to its soft orange gloom. The hearth is not merely part of this house. Tonight, it is almost the house itself. Everything important seems arranged around it. The cooking pot hangs above the flames. Damp clothing steams nearby. A pair of wooden shoes rests close enough to dry, but not close enough to scorch. Someone has pushed a small stool towards the warmth, and the dog has claimed the warmest patch of floor with the confidence of a nobleman occupying inherited land. You cannot really blame him. The farther you move from the fire, the colder the room becomes. Cold leaks through the daub walls and creeps beneath the oak door. Tiny draughts find cracks around shutters. Even the packed floor seems to breathe winter upward through the rushes. A medieval household may have walls, a roof, and a barred entrance, but warmth remains stubbornly local. You hold your hands toward the flames. The backs of your fingers remain cold while your palms begin to burn. There is apparently no perfect distance. The woman of the household lowers the iron cooking hook slightly, bringing a clay pot closer to the heat. The arrangement is simple but clever. Hooks, chains, trivets, and iron stands allow pots to be moved nearer to or farther from the flame. Cooking depends less on turning a convenient dial and more on knowing the moods of burning wood. Too much flame and supper catches, too little and everyone waits. The fire, therefore, receives more attention than several members of the household. A bundle of thin sticks lies near the hearth, carefully kept dry. Nearby are thicker pieces of split wood. Fuel has taken hours of work to gather, cut, carry, stack, and protect from rain. In regions where timber is scarce, people might burn peat brushwood, dried turf, or whatever combustible material the landscape provides. Nothing that produces heat is treated casually. You notice the householder examining one log before placing it on the embers. The wood is dry enough to burn steadily, though it still releases a little smoke. Smoke is everywhere. It does not pour upward obediently as it would through a later chimney. Instead, it curls beneath the roof, collecting in layers before finding its way through vents gaps or the thatch itself. Your eyes begin to sting slightly. You shift lower. The smoke shifts lower too. This feels personal. People living here know how to position themselves. They understand which stool catches less smoke, which corner remains warmest, and which opening should be adjusted when the wind changes. A visitor learns by coughing, yet the smoke has uses. It discourages some insects. It dries timbers and hanging foods. Meat suspended above a hearth may slowly absorb smoke, helping preserve it. Smoke blackens rafters, clothes walls, and probably every optimistic idea you once had about medieval interior decorating. Above you hangs a small strip of smoked meat. You look at it, the dog looks at it. Neither of you appears likely to receive it. Near the edge of the hearth lies a curious object, a small piece of iron, dark and worn smooth from handling. Iron carries practical value, of course, but also a long reputation in folk belief. Some people place iron near doors, beds, cradles, or hearths because it is thought to discourage troublesome spirits, fair folk, or other things best left outside. Some swear that iron beside a hearth protects the household from unseen visitors. No one can quite agree whether such practices are serious belief inherited habit or simply something people continue because their grandmother would be furious if they stopped. In this house, nobody removes the iron. That seems recommendation enough. The older woman who has been spinning pauses and reaches toward the fire with a short stick. She draws several embers closer together, then covers part of them with ash. You watch carefully. This is preparation for later. A household does not want the fire to die completely during a winter night. Rekindling flames from cold materials can be difficult, especially when tinder is damp. Instead, hot embers can be banked beneath ash, where they may survive for hours. In the morning, those embers can be uncovered, fed with dry tinder and kindling, and coaxed back into flame. If the fire goes out entirely, someone may have to borrow live coals from a neighbor. That sounds simple until you imagine walking through freezing mud before sunrise carrying someone else's fire in a pot. Medieval neighborliness occasionally comes with very specific logistical requirements. The householder adds another piece of wood. The flame brightens. Light moves across the faces around you, turning wrinkles, noses, brows, and hands into shifting landscapes of shadow. There is no even illumination here. The room has bright islands and dark borders. A spoon disappears into darkness when someone sets it too far from the hearth. A moment later, 3 people search for it. The spoon has moved perhaps 2 feet. Night has already won a minor victory. You begin to see why work done after sunset tends to gather near the flames. Mending leather, spinning thread, checking tools, stirring food, and telling quiet stories all happen within this small circle. But fire brings danger along with comfort. The roof above you is thatch. The floor contains dry rushes. Wooden furniture crowds the room. Clothing is wool and linen. A spark landing in the wrong place could turn warmth into disaster with frightening speed. Water therefore waits in containers nearby, and everyone seems instinctively alert whenever sparks rise too high. One lands among the rushes. A foot stamps it out immediately. No one even stops talking. You suspect this is not the first time. Fire is both servant and threat, a useful creature that must never be trusted completely. The woman lifts the lid from the pot. Steam rolls upward, carrying the smell of onions, grain herbs, and something earthy you cannot immediately identify. Perhaps peas, perhaps cabbage, possibly a vegetable that has surrendered its identity after several hours of boiling. The scent fills the room. Your stomach responds before dignity can intervene. The household hears it. Nobody comments. This is kindness. Outside, the wind strengthens against the walls, making the oak door tremble faintly beneath its bar. Inside, the hearth answers with a slow crack of splitting wood. You sit closer. The dog shifts against your boot. The smoke continues wandering through the rafters while the bell beyond the village becomes only a distant memory. For now there is no road, and no winter field. There is only this circle of firelight, the careful stack of fuel, the simmering pot, the banked embers, waiting for morning, and the old understanding shared by everyone beneath the thatch. As long as the hearth lives, the house can endure the night. The steam rising from the pot thickens for a moment, carrying with it the warm smell of onions, grain, and something smoky from the hearth. Around you, the household begins to shift almost without instruction. Stools are pulled closer, a low board is cleared, wooden bowls appear from a chest. The spoon that vanished into darkness has somehow returned, which already feels like a small triumph over the night. No one calls it a dining room because there is no dining room. There is simply the part of the house where people can sit without freezing, stepping on tools, or accidentally disturbing the dog. The woman of the household lifts the pot from its hook with a folded cloth wrapped around her hand. The contents are thick, dark, and comforting rather than elegant. Pottage has been simmering for hours, perhaps longer, and it carries whatever the household can spare: peas, barley, onions, cabbage, leeks, a little salt, maybe a shred of smoked meat if fortune has been generous. Tonight, fortune has apparently been modest. Pottage is less a single recipe than a habit of survival. It changes with the season, the harvest, the contents of the garden, and the depth of the family storehouse. In summer it may contain fresh greens. In winter it becomes heavier with dried peas, beans, grain, and whatever roots have survived storage. You watch as each bowl receives a ladleful. In a medieval household, supper is not expected to reinvent itself every evening. A round loaf of coarse bread appears next. Its crust is thick, its interior dense, and the grain has been ground with enough enthusiasm to leave the occasional gritty surprise. You tear off a piece and discover that your teeth are being asked to participate in the agricultural economy. The householder dips his bread into the pottage. The bread softens, the warm broth carries salt and onion, and suddenly the entire room seems less cold. A shallow wooden trencher sits near one end of the board, though trenchers can also be made from thick slices of stale bread. In wealthier or more formal settings, here wooden dishes are reused until they crack, warp, or become too stained to pretend otherwise. You are given another wooden spoon polished smooth by years of handling. It fits the hand nicely, though the bowl is shallower than you expect. After several attempts, you learn to tilt it carefully. He positions himself beneath your elbow. His strategy has centuries behind it. A jug of weak ale passes from hand to hand. Water can be perfectly drinkable in many places despite later exaggerations, but ale is common filling and familiar. It may be brewed at home in small batches, its strength varying with grain skill and circumstance. You take a cautious drink. It is sour, grainy, and warmer than anything you would voluntarily order. A dish containing several pieces of smoked fish is placed near the board. The fish is salty and firm, preserved for weather when fresh food is difficult to obtain. One small piece is divided among several people with an efficiency that suggests long practice. Nothing edible is wasted casually. Bones, peelings, and scraps may go to animals or into later cooking. The rhythm of supper is slow because there is no reason to hurry. Outside the lane is dark. Work that requires daylight has ended. The fire burns steadily, and everyone eats while listening to the wind worry at the shutters. You hear talk of a cart axle that cracked near the Manor Road, a market toll that has apparently increased again, and a neighbour who claims his hens stopped laying after someone praised them too enthusiastically. That last matter receives serious attention. There is an old fear in many communities that envy, praise, or the evil eye can spoil good fortune. A healthy animal, a flourishing child, or an unusually fine crop may attract unwanted attention from forces visible or otherwise. Some people answer excessive praise with a blessing, a protective gesture, or a quick remark meant to diminish the compliment. Some swear that saying a cow is too beautiful is practically an invitation for trouble. No one can quite agree whether the neighbor truly believes this or simply wants someone else to blame for lazy hens. Either way, the household avoids praising the dog. The older woman reaches toward a bundle hanging near the wall and pinches dried sage between her fingers. A little is crushed into the remaining pottage. Herbs serve both flavor and remedy, and the boundary between kitchen and medicine is thin. Sage may be valued for digestion, sore throats, or general strength, while other households rely on parsley, mint, rue, fennel, or whatever grows nearby. Every grandmother seems to possess at least one cure involving a plant and complete confidence. Whether the cure works is sometimes a separate matter. Another ladleful is offered smaller than the first. The room has grown dimmer while you eat. The precious beeswax candle has been snuffed, leaving the hearth to do most of the work. Faces now brighten only when flames rise. The householder wipes his bowl with bread, consuming the last traces of broth. It feels less like etiquette than common sense. When supper ends, the board is not abandoned in a heap. Bowls are scraped clean, spoons are wiped, the pot is moved away from the strongest heat, but what remains inside is preserved carefully. Tomorrow it may be warmed again, stretched with water, or transformed with another handful of grain. Food carries memory from one meal into the next. A few crumbs fall between the rushes. The dog finds them before anyone else. At last the jug is corked. The smoked fish is wrapped. The loaf is placed somewhere dry and out of reach of animals, which in this house is evidently a complicated geographical problem. You sit back, warmed from within now, and listen to the quiet sounds of dishes being stacked. The fire murmurs. Rain touches the roof. Your empty bowl rests warm between your hands. For a household that possesses little, the meal has done exactly what it must: filled the stomach, gathered everyone close, conserved what can be saved, and carried the people beneath this roof one more step into the long darkness. Your empty bowl is taken from your hands, and almost immediately the darkness seems to grow heavier. It has been gathering patiently around the house while you eat, waiting beyond the shutters, slipping into corners, filling the spaces between rafters, stools, chests, and hanging bundles of herbs. Now that supper is finished and the household has no reason to keep every small flame alive, night begins to take possession of the room. The beeswax candle remains extinguished. You glance toward the little blackened wick and understand why no one relights it. Wax costs effort and money. Bees must be kept honey-harvested comb-collected wax rendered and shaped. In wealthier homes and churches, rows of candles may glow against painted walls and polished metal, but here a good candle is something to be guarded. Tallow candles made from animal fat are cheaper, though they can smoke, soften, sputter, and carry a smell that makes the humble hearth seem almost refined by comparison. So the household depends mainly on firelight. The effect is stranger than you expect. A modern room feels equally visible from one wall to another, but this room does not. Objects exist only when the fire chooses to reveal them. A clay jug flashes orange, then disappears. An iron hook gleams above the hearth. The old woman's hands move in and out of shadow as she resumes spinning. Beyond the circle of flame, the room becomes uncertain. You know the oak chest is there because you saw it earlier, yet now it has become a low black shape against the wall. The door is little more than a rectangle of deeper darkness. The rafters above you vanish completely. You begin to understand how darkness can feel physical, not frightening exactly, just present. The householder moves to the shutter opening and checks the wooden fastening. There is no broad sheet of clear glass between the household and the winter night. Glass windows exist in important churches and wealthy buildings, but ordinary homes often rely on shutters, cloth parchment horn, or simply small openings designed to keep weather outside. The shutter closes with a dull wooden thump. The remaining grey light vanishes. You are now surrounded by walls, roof, fire, and blackness. A little wind still enters through cracks. It slides across your ankle and disappears beneath the rushes. You pull your feet closer to the hearth. Nearby, the woman begins repairing a wool garment. She works slowly, bringing the cloth close to the flames whenever she needs to see the stitch. Her needle catches the light for a moment, then vanishes between her fingers. There are limits to what people can accomplish after dark. Fine work becomes difficult. Reading requires expensive light and, of course, the ability to read in the first place. Outdoor work becomes dangerous or impossible. The rhythm of the household narrows naturally, yet bedtime does not arrive the instant the sun disappears. Hands remain busy. Someone twists cord. Someone checks the edge of a wooden tool handle. The householder scrapes dried mud from one boot with a blunt knife. The old woman continues spinning as though darkness is merely an inconvenience she has defeated many times before. You begin to suspect that she could spin thread during an eclipse. The fire crackles. A burning stick collapses inward, sending sparks briefly upward. Everyone looks. Then everyone returns to work. You hear a faint scratching somewhere beyond the hearth. The dog lifts his head. You lift yours. Nothing appears. A moment later the scratching stops. Mice thrive in homes where grain straw, warmth, and human crumbs are available. They are not welcome. But they are hardly unusual either. Cats may be valued partly because of them, though medieval ideas about cats vary widely by region and century. Some households appreciate them as useful mousers. Some stories associate certain colours or behaviours with luck, witchcraft, storms, or the supernatural. No one can quite agree whether the cat sleeping near the grain chest is considered fortunate, suspicious, or simply too lazy to be judged. At present, it opens one eye, the dog stares at it, the cat closes the eye again, a decisive victory. The household's talk grows quieter as the light fades. Stories become easier than work. The old woman begins recalling a traveller who once lost his way between this village and the next during a moonless night. According to her, he followed what he thought was a lantern until he found himself standing in a marsh. Some swear that wandering lights can lure travellers from safe roads. Others say marsh gases, distant torches, stars seen through mist, or simple exhaustion explain many such tales. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The old woman clearly prefers the version involving spirits. It is better storytelling. The householder mutters that the traveller had probably been drinking. That is also plausible. You listen as wind presses softly against the shutter. Without outside light, you lose your sense of distance. The lane might be 10 paces away or 100. The church tower might still stand against the sky, but you cannot see it. Fields, hedges, barns, muddy tracks, and frozen puddles have effectively ceased to exist. Only sounds remain. A horse shifts somewhere outside. A bucket chain knocks once against a post. Farther away, a dog barks twice, then nothing. The silence between these sounds feels enormous. You realize how much medieval life depends on memory once darkness falls. People remember where tools hang, where stools stand, where the water vessel sits, where the door latch can be found by touch. You attempt to stand and nearly collide with a bench you had forgotten was beside you. The household watches politely. No one laughs. The dog does appear, disappointed. You lower yourself again. A small rushlight is prepared near the hearth. A peeled rush, dried and dipped in fat, can provide a cheap little flame for people who cannot afford to waste candles. It does not burn brilliantly or endlessly, but it is enough for a short task. The woman lights one end. A thin flame appears. For a few minutes she uses it to finish stitching the torn wool. The rushlight makes the room look even darker around it. When the repair is complete, she pinches the flame out. Economy returns immediately. The household now sits almost entirely by the hearth. Faces soften into shadow. The edges of the room recede. Even conversation begins to slow. You can smell smoke in your hair and damp wool near the door. Beneath that lies the faint sweetness of dried herbs and the lingering memory of supper. Outside, the medieval village is submerged in true night. Inside, nobody fights the darkness. They simply adjust to it. Work becomes smaller, voices become lower, movement becomes careful, light becomes precious. And as the flames sink another inch towards the embers, you feel the entire house gently narrowing around its warm center, preparing itself for the deeper hours still to come. As the fire sinks lower, the parts of the room beyond its glow seem to gather secrets. You notice first how the rushes change beneath your boots near the hearth. They are dry and brittle. From heat, their ends curled and browned. Farther toward the walls, they feel colder, softer, and faintly damp. They have been spread across the packed floor in layers, partly for comfort, partly to absorb spills, mud grease, and whatever else a crowded household carries indoors. Fresh rushes can smell pleasantly green when first laid down. These no longer do. They smell of smoke, earth, old straw, spilled ale, damp wool, and several weeks of domestic life that nobody has felt an urgent need to catalogue. The woman of the household notices you looking down. She lifts one corner with the end of the stick. Beneath the top layer lie darker stems, crumbs, splinters, bits of thread. A nutshell and something that may once have been a pea. You decide curiosity has limits. Rushes are sometimes mixed with sweet-smelling herbs, such as meadow sweet mint or lavender, where such plants are available. In wealthier houses, fresh floor coverings might be renewed more often. Here, replacing them means gathering, cutting, drying, carrying, and laying new material, so the work is done when time and season permit. The old woman reaches down and pulls out a dried sprig of herb from among the stems. She crushes it between her fingers. A faint sweetness rises above the smell of smoke. For a moment the floor becomes almost elegant. Then the dog scratches himself vigorously beside you. The illusion ends. Fleas are part of household life, especially where people, animals, wool, straw, and bedding share close quarters. Lice can inhabit clothing and hair. Bedbugs are also no strangers to timber buildings and straw mattresses. Medieval people are not necessarily unaware of these pests. They wash, comb, air clothes, beat bedding, use herbs, and complain about biting insects with the same weary irritation that anyone might. The difference is that tonight there is no convenient shop selling a miracle bottle with a cheerful label. The householder's wife takes a wooden comb from a shelf and runs it through a piece of wool cloth before folding it away. Combs are personal objects, and sometimes surprisingly fine ones made from wood bone, antler, or ivory, depending on wealth. They serve practical grooming, but they can also carry symbolic associations with cleanliness, beauty, or status. This one is plain and worn. It has lost 2 teeth. It still works. That in this house appears to be the standard by which most possessions are judged. The scratching you heard earlier returns. This time it comes from near the grain chest. The cat opens both eyes. For several seconds nothing moves. Then a tiny shape darts between the rushes. The cat launches forward with such sudden seriousness that the dog stands up in alarm. A stool tips sideways. Someone catches a bowl before it falls. The mouse vanishes beneath the chest. The cat stops and stares into the darkness as if the failure has been part of a larger strategy. The dog looks impressed anyway. The householder mutters something under his breath and wedges a small piece of wood beneath the chest to close a gap. Grain is valuable enough to defend. Mice can ruin stores not only by eating them but by fouling them. In a household preparing for winter, a sack of barley or oats may represent weeks of future meals. Chests, bins, sacks, hooks and shelves therefore matter enormously. You begin to notice how much of the room is dedicated to storage. A bundle of onions hangs from a beam. Dried herbs are tied in bunches. A small sack rests on a shelf above the dog's reach. Tools hang from pegs. A clay pot stands in one dark corner. Near the wall sits the oak chest you noticed earlier, its iron fittings barely visible in the firelight. Such chests are among the most useful objects in a medieval home. Clothing, linen, documents, food, small valuables, and household goods can all disappear inside one. A chest may serve as cupboard, seat table, strongbox, or inconvenient obstacle for a sleepy guest. You place one hand on the lid. It is cool and rough. An iron lock hangs at the front. The large key remains at the woman's belt. Keys are more than tools. They represent control over what a household possesses. In some places, a married woman carrying household keys can visibly signal her responsibility for stores, food, linen, and domestic goods. You withdraw your hand. There is something about a large iron key that politely discourages unnecessary exploration. Above the chest hangs a small bunch of dried plants tied with red thread. You ask what they are for. The old woman says they keep crawling things away. The householder says they make the room smell better. His wife says nothing. Some swear that wormwood, rue, tansy, mint, or other strong herbs discourage fleas and moths. Others mix practical pest control with protective customs, hanging certain plants near doors, beds, or storage spaces because they are believed to guard against illness, bad luck, or unseen influence. Even now it is hard to tell whether every bundle is medicine, superstition, insect repellent, or simply something grandmother insisted must hang there, probably all four. You look upward. From the beams hang baskets, ropes, dried food, and household objects placed high to protect them from animals, children, moisture, and mice. The rafters themselves are thick with soot. Cobwebs occupy corners nobody can easily reach. A spider crawls slowly along one beam. No one bothers it. Spiders may be tolerated because they catch flies and other insects, though folklore occasionally gives them stranger reputations. Some tales connect spiders with patience, luck, or sacred stories. Others treat them merely as part of the house. This one appears mainly interested in avoiding the smoke. Near the wall, you notice a narrow gap where daub has cracked around a timber. Cold air leaks through it. A scrap of cloth has been pushed into the opening. Repairs like this are constant. Walls need patching, thatch needs mending, doors swell and shrink, timber shifts, damp enters, wind finds every weakness eventually. A medieval house is less a finished structure than an ongoing negotiation with weather. Tonight, weather seems to be winning several small arguments. Another drop of moisture appears near the edge of the roof. A bowl has already been placed beneath it. Plink. Nobody looks up. Apparently, this leak has tenure. The household continues settling itself. The woman shakes out a wool covering and examines it carefully before folding it near one wall. The old woman carries a small basket away from the hearth. The householder checks the grain chest one more time. The cat remains stationed beside it. You suspect the mouse has chosen a long evening indoors. As you sit among rushes, herbs, crumbs, tools, chests, animals, insects, and shadows, the house begins to feel less simple than it first appeared. Every dark corner has a purpose. Every peg carries something needed. Every bundle has been saved. Every scrap of cloth may mend another object. Nothing disappears merely because it is old, and nothing living seems entirely excluded. People, dogs, cats, spiders, fleas, mice, and perhaps a few creatures no one has yet noticed all share the same smoky shelter against winter. The fire gives a soft crack. The cat's ears twitch. Somewhere beneath the rushes something rustles again. You pull your feet slightly closer to the stool. The long night continues and the hidden corners of the medieval home continue quietly living around you. The faint rustling beneath the rushes finally stops, and with it the last excuse anyone has for delaying the inevitable. The household begins preparing to sleep. Nothing about this resembles the quiet retreat to a private bedroom that you might imagine. There are no separate chambers waiting behind polished doors, no soft mattress prepared beneath clean linen, and certainly no servant arriving to ask whether you prefer the room slightly warmer. Warmth has already been discussed. The answer is no. The woman of the household drags a broad sack stuffed with straw toward the wall nearest the hearth. It is flattened in the middle from many nights of use, its surface uneven where the straw has shifted into stubborn lumps. She grips one end, shakes it vigorously, and sends a small cloud of dust rising into the firelight. You move your face aside just in time. The dog does not. He sneezes twice and looks personally betrayed. Straw mattresses are practical because straw is available, replaceable, and far better than sleeping directly on cold earth or boards. But the filling needs attention. It compresses, breaks down, attracts pests, and slowly turns a comfortable bed into something resembling a sack of argumentative sticks. The household knows this. The householder kneels and reaches beneath the mattress, pulling out several flattened handfuls. Fresh straw from a bundle near the wall is pushed inside through a small opening. He spreads it by hand. You watch the mattress rise again. Not much, but enough. Nearby, the older woman unfolds a wool blanket that has been resting across the oak chest. Its edges are worn thin, yet the center remains thick and heavy. Wool matters greatly in a winter house. Even when damp, it can retain warmth better than many other available materials, and layers of wool become one of the household's best defenses against the cold. A second covering appears. This one is patched in 3 places. Then a fur-lined cloak is brought from a peg. It is not ceremonial. No jewelled clasp hangs from it. No king has worn it while staring thoughtfully from a castle battlement. It is simply another layer, and tonight another layer is valuable. You begin to understand that almost any garment may become bedding after sunset. Cloaks spread over blankets. Tunics are folded beneath heads. Spare cloth becomes a bolster. A rolled mantle makes a perfectly respectable pillow if nobody asks too many questions. Medieval furniture has a remarkable ability to become something else when required. A chest becomes a bench becomes a table, a cloak becomes a blanket, and apparently your folded sleeve is about to become luxury neck support. The woman presses a small stuffed bolster near one end of the straw mattress. Better off homes may possess feather beds or feather-filled pillows, but feathers are valuable and large quantities require money or fortunate access to geese and poultry. Here straw, wool, and cloth perform most of the work. The householder points toward the sleeping places. You realize there are fewer beds than people. Sharing a bed is ordinary enough. Families, servants, travelers, and even unrelated people may sleep beside one another depending on circumstances. Privacy is limited, warmth is important, and beds represent useful household wealth. Tonight, bodies become part of the heating system. It is surprisingly efficient, socially complicated perhaps, but efficient. The oldest woman receives the position nearest the wall, yet within reach of the hearth's warmth. The younger householders take the wider straw mattress. Another sleeper has a rough pallet closer to the door. You are shown a narrow place beside the hearth between the dog and a wooden bench. You inspect it. The dog inspects you. Neither party seems entirely satisfied with the arrangement. You are given a folded wool covering anyway. Before lying down, everyone checks clothing. Shoes are placed where they can be found without searching through darkness. Damp outer garments remain near the fire, though not close enough to catch. Belts, knives, keys, and small possessions are arranged within reach. Keeping belongings close at night is practical. A house may contain servants, guests, relatives, and strangers passing through, and even where trust is strong, darkness has a talent for making objects disappear. There are also older beliefs about how beds should be arranged. Some people dislike sleeping with the head facing certain directions. Others place protective objects near the bed, tuck herbs beneath bedding, or avoid particular positions associated with death spirits or ill fortune. Some swear that sleeping with your head toward a doorway invites uneasy dreams. No one can quite agree whether the rule comes from religion, local superstition, or generations of people discovering that doors are terribly drafty. The older woman places a small sprig of dried herb near her bolster. You ask what it is. She says lavender. The householder says it is probably something else. She gives him a look. It is lavender. Herbs may be tucked into bedding for scent insects, sleep headaches, or protection. Mugwort, lavender, rosemary, mint, and other plants appear in remedies and customs whose meanings often overlap. A sweet smell rises faintly when she crushes the sprig. For a moment it almost defeats the smoke, almost. The woman begins checking the hearth one final time before sleep. She does not let the flames remain high. A large unattended fire beneath a thatched roof would be madness. Instead, embers are gathered carefully and partly covered with ash. The room darkens further. You loosen your boots. Removing them is a slow pleasure. Your feet ache from the road, and the warmth of the room has made the leather feel tighter. When the second boot comes free, you stretch your toes toward the hearth. The dog immediately places his head on the abandoned boot. Apparently, ownership transfers rapidly after sunset. You leave it there. A wool blanket is placed over your shoulders. It is heavier than expected, rough against the skin and faintly scented with smoke. But as the cold begins creeping from the floor, you appreciate every thread. Across the room, the household settles into shapes beneath blankets and cloaks. There is little ceremony. Someone coughs. Someone turns. The straw crackles loudly beneath shifting weight. The sound seems enormous in the quiet room. You lower yourself onto your own pallet. Immediately, one piece of straw discovers exactly where your shoulder is. You adjust. Another finds your hip. You adjust again. Medieval bedding, you decide, believes comfort should be earned. At last, you find a position that feels almost generous. The fire is now mostly red embers. Its glow barely reaches the rafters. The oak door remains barred. Your boots wait beside the sleeping dog. The large iron key is still close to the householder's wife. The old woman's herb lies near her head. Cold gathers beyond the blankets, but beneath the wool a little pocket of warmth slowly forms around you. The house grows still, and for the first time tonight, everyone beneath the thatched roof begins surrendering the day. For several quiet moments you believe everyone has settled. Then the older woman sits up again. The movement is slow enough not to disturb the others, but the straw beneath her crackles like dry leaves. She reaches toward the small shelf near the wall where the last ember light barely touches a wooden cross darkened by smoke. Sleep, you discover, is not quite allowed to begin before prayer. The household does not gather formally. No priest stands over you. There is no choir, no great candlelit chapel, only a few tired people beneath a thatched roof, cold feet beneath wool, and a wooden cross hanging slightly crooked on the wall. The householder murmurs the beginning of a familiar prayer. The others follow. You listen. Their voices are low, almost swallowed by the wind outside. They pray for the living, for the dead, for the safety of the household, for animals in the byre, for crops waiting under winter soil, and for protection through the darkness until morning. Night feels different when darkness is truly complete. During the day, a person can see the church tower, the road, the neighbouring fields, and the smoke from other homes. At night, everything beyond the walls becomes invisible. Prayer gives shape to what cannot be seen. The older woman touches the wooden cross. Beside it hangs a tiny object wrapped in cloth. You noticed it earlier, but assumed it was another household bundle. Now she carefully takes it down. Inside is a small fragment of something pale, bone perhaps, or stone, or a piece of wood that has spent enough years being described confidently that nobody dares question it. The family says it once touched a saint's shrine. That explanation is vague enough to be impressive. Saints' relics can hold enormous spiritual importance in medieval life. Great churches treasure bones, cloth fragments of crosses, or objects associated with holy men and women. Ordinary people may carry smaller tokens, pilgrim badges, blessed threads, pieces of wax, or scraps said to have touched something sacred. Authenticity can be complicated. No one can quite agree whether this particular fragment has ever been within 50 miles of a saint. The older woman clearly has no interest in the debate. She crosses herself and returns it to its cloth. The householder says that a pilgrim sold it to his father years ago. His wife quietly remarks that the same pilgrim also sold 3 other families remarkably similar fragments. The dog sighs. You suspect even he has doubts. Still, the object stays near the bed. Belief here does not always require certainty. A charm may comfort because it belonged to a grandmother. A blessing may remain useful because it has been repeated for generations. A sprig of herb may repel insects, calm the nerves, or protect against something less easily named. One custom slides into another. The older woman reaches beneath her bolster and checks the dried lavender again. Beside it lies a short length of red thread knotted 3 times. You ask about it quietly. She says it keeps bad dreams away. The householder says it keeps nothing away. She tells him he snores. The theological discussion ends there. Threads, knots, written prayers, herbs, pieces of iron crosses, blessed salt, and other protective objects can become part of local custom. Clergy do not always approve when folk practice strays too far from accepted teaching, but people living through long winters often prefer several layers of protection. A prayer to a saint and a bit of iron near the door are not considered mutually exclusive. You remember the dark iron object beside the hearth. It suddenly seems less decorative. The woman of the household checks the oak door again, pushing the bar firmly into its brackets. Beyond it, the wind whispers through the lane. A branch scratches against the wall. Everyone looks toward the sound. It comes again. Scratch, pause, scratch. The dog lifts his head. You feel your body become slightly more awake. The householder does not rise. Tree, his expression seems to say. The older woman's expression says something entirely different. Night is full of stories here. Some warn of wandering spirits, others speak of restless, dead, troublesome fair folk, witches, night hags, demons, or nameless presences that should not be invited across a threshold. Beliefs vary wildly from place to place and century to century, and even neighbours may disagree about what is possible. Some swear that certain nights belong more strongly to the unseen world. Others swear that those who tell such stories have simply drunk too much ale. Even now, it is hard to tell whether a frightening tale is sincere belief, moral warning, entertainment, or a useful way to keep children from wandering outside. Probably some mixture of all four. The branch scratches again. The old woman pulls her blanket higher. You do the same. Not because you believe anything naturally, because the room is cold, obviously. Near the doorway, the householder's wife places a small pinch of something on the hearthstone. Salt. It is valuable enough not to waste casually, yet salt appears in religious and folk customs across medieval Europe. Blessed salt may be associated with purification and protection, while ordinary household practice can collect additional meanings over generations. You ask whether this salt has been blessed. She shrugs. That is somehow less reassuring. A coal shifts beneath the ash. A tiny red glow opens, then closes again. The house is nearly dark now. You can make out only silhouettes, the curve of a shoulder beneath wool, the edge of the chest, the crooked cross, the shape of the dog beside your boots. Someone begins another short prayer. This one is barely audible. It ends with a request for peaceful sleep. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids looks almost the same as the room. Then a bell sounds far away. One deep note crosses the sleeping countryside, from the monastery, faint but unmistakable. The old woman crosses herself beneath her blanket. The householder turns onto his side. Outside, whatever people fear or imagine remains beyond the barred oak door. Inside, faith, habit, iron herbs, salt wool, and a questionable relic stand guard together. And beneath all of them, you finally begin drifting toward sleep. The bell fades so slowly that for a while you are not certain whether you can still hear it or whether your mind is simply holding the sound. Around you, the household has gone quiet, not silent, never silent. You lie beneath the heavy wool blanket, your cheek resting against the folded cloth that serves as a pillow, and begin to notice how many sounds remain. After conversation ends, the straw mattress crackles whenever you breathe too deeply. Someone across the room snores in short, patient bursts. The dog twitches beside your stolen boot. A coal shifts under ash with the softest little sigh. Above everything, the wind moves across the thatched roof. It does not roar. It brushes, pauses, then brushes again, as if enormous fingers are passing gently over the house. You open your eyes. There is almost nothing to see. The hearth gives off only a red pulse now, enough to outline the legs of a stool and the lower edge of the oak chest. Above that, darkness reaches all the way to the rafters. You listen. A cow shifts somewhere beyond the wall. Wood creaks. Then the village dog begins barking. Not this household's dog. He raises his head, but does not join in. The barking comes from farther down the lane. 2 sharp sounds, a pause, 3 more. Then another dog answers from the opposite side of the village. For half a minute the darkness contains an entire conversation you cannot understand. Then both animals stop. The silence afterward feels deeper. In a medieval village, nighttime sound carries farther than you might expect. There are no engines humming, no traffic passing, no electric lights buzzing behind glass. A voice in a lane, a horse stamping in a stable, or the closing of a distant gate can travel clearly through cold air. Even water becomes noticeable. Beyond the houses, the little river continues flowing beneath the mist. You cannot see it yet. At quiet moments you hear a faint, steady rush, softened by distance. The village may sleep. The river does not. A shutter bangs once somewhere outside. You wait for it to happen again. It does. Bang! Then someone in another house mutters loudly enough to be heard through the lane. The shutter is secured. Peace returns. You smile into the darkness. Even medieval nights apparently contain someone getting out of bed because something was left loose. The monastery bell sounds again after what might be an hour. You have no clock beside you, so the bell becomes your best guide to passing time. In monastic communities, the night is divided by offices of prayer, and bells can call monks from sleep, while nearby villagers hear the same sound from their beds. The exact pattern varies by place and period. No one can quite agree when later describing old routines how faithfully every small community followed ideal schedules through cold rain, illness, and ordinary human exhaustion. You suspect there must have been monks who heard a midnight bell and briefly considered whether heaven would understand another 5 minutes. Still the sound matters. It crosses fields no one can see. It passes over hedges silvered with frost. It moves through the village and enters this house through cracks around the shutter. The old woman stirs when it rings. She does not rise. A moment later she is still again. You begin to understand, and how people can sleep through bells they have heard all their lives. A different sound comes from the roof, a quick patter, then another. You hold still. The sound moves across the thatch, probably a rat, possibly a bird. The older woman would no doubt provide a third explanation involving something with no business being on a roof at midnight. Some swear that owls calling near a house can warn of death, bad weather, or strange visitors, while others treat an owl as exactly what it is, a bird looking for mice. Local beliefs cling to nighttime animals because darkness makes everything harder to identify. A shape glimpsed between trees becomes larger. A cry in a field becomes stranger. A fox can sound remarkably human when you are lying awake in a room full of stories. As if summoned by the thought, a distant cry rises beyond the village, thin, sharp, unpleasantly close to a scream. Your eyes open wider. The dog lifts his head again. Nobody else moves. The sound comes a second time. Then you recognize the rough bark of a fox. The dog puts his head back down. You would like to pretend you had already reached the same conclusion. The roof creaks as the wind changes. Timber houses are never completely still. Beams contract in cold. Pegged joints shift. Thatch moves. Walls make small complaints as temperature and moisture change. To someone unfamiliar with the house, every creak feels meaningful. To the family, most have probably had names for years. That squeak belongs to the roof beam. That tap is the loose shutter. That scratch is the branch. That little knock near the grain chest is probably the mouse humiliating the cat again. You hear it. Tap, scratch, pause. The cat suddenly darts across the room. You hear rushes rustle a soft thump and something that sounds suspiciously like the wooden spoon being displaced once more. No one wakes. The cat returns several minutes later and settles somewhere near the chest. Whether there has been a victory is impossible to tell. Even now it is hard to tell whether medieval homes were ever truly quiet, because so much life was packed into such small spaces. People breathe, animals shift, fuel settles, wind enters cracks, rain touches thatch, insects move through straw, ropes knock against posts, church bells speak across the dark. You stop waiting for silence. Instead, you let the sounds become part of the night. The river, the wind, the sleepers, the distant horse stamping once in its stall, another soft bark, the faint bell far beyond the fields. They form a rhythm without meaning too. Your breathing slows. The blanket grows warmer around your shoulders. The smell of smoke is now so familiar that you barely notice it. Somewhere above, an owl gives one low call. This time you do not open your eyes. The village outside remains invisible but no longer empty. It is full of sleeping houses, banked fires, animals, watchful dogs, and people lying beneath wool, exactly as you are. The bell fades again, the old house creaks once beside you, and you sink a little deeper into the uneasy, ordinary, surprisingly crowded silence of a medieval night. At some point, the rhythm of the house changes. You wake without knowing why. The room is darker than before, and for several seconds you cannot remember where you are. There is no moonlight through the shutter, no bright ember to guide the eye, only a faint reddish glow buried beneath ash where the hearth used to be. Then the cold explains everything. It has crept beneath the blanket while you slept. Your nose is cold. Your hands are cold. Even the straw beneath you seems colder, as though the floor has spent the night patiently pulling warmth downward into the earth. You tuck your knees closer to your chest. Across the room someone turns beneath a wool covering. The movement produces a long crackle of straw, followed by a muffled cough. These are the deepest hours of the night, when the heat, stored in walls, clothing, bedding, and bodies, has faded while dawn remains far away. The hearth no longer throws warmth across the room. It merely remembers fire. You can smell ash more strongly now than smoke. The dog has moved from your boot and curled tightly against the side of your pallet. His back presses against your ankle. For once, neither of you objects to the arrangement. Shared warmth is one of the simplest defenses against winter. People sleep closer together, not only because beds and space are limited, but because bodies hold heat. Children may share beds with siblings. Servants may sleep near one another. Travellers may be given whatever space can be spared. Privacy becomes less urgent when your toes feel carved from ice. A sound rises from the far side of the room. The householder's wife is awake. She sits slowly and wraps a cloak around her shoulders. No one volunteers to join her. This is understandable. She must tend the hearth. The embers banked earlier may still be alive beneath the ash, but if they cool completely, morning becomes much more troublesome. She crosses the room barefoot. You hear her feet brushing through rushes. At the hearth she kneels, takes a short iron poker, and carefully pushes aside the grey ash. Nothing happens. She scrapes again. Then a red point appears, tiny, dim, but alive. You watch through half-closed eyes as she gathers the surviving embers together. Dry tinder comes from a protected bundle near the wall, perhaps thin wood, shavings, dry grass bark, or another material saved specifically for this purpose. She places a little over the glow. Then she bends close and blows. Once, twice. A spark brightens, smoke curls upward. She blows again. A tiny flame appears. It is almost embarrassingly small after everything the hearth accomplished earlier, yet everyone in the room depends on it. The householder remains beneath his blanket. He offers a sleepy remark. His wife responds without looking at him. You do not understand every word, but the tone translates effortlessly across centuries. If he has opinions about fire-making, he is apparently welcome to get up and demonstrate them himself. He becomes quiet, a sensible man. Thin sticks are added. The little flame crawls along them. Soon a modest fire begins breathing again. Warmth does not reach you yet, but the sight alone feels comforting. Keeping a fire alive through the night requires experience. Too much fuel wastes precious wood and increases the risk of sparks. Too little may leave nothing by morning. Ash can insulate embers, allowing them to smoulder slowly until someone wakes to revive them. Some households may use fire covers, hearth arrangements, or carefully banked coals depending on local practice. And if all else fails, there is always the neighbour. Borrowing fire is ancient enough to have accumulated its own customs and superstitions. In some places, people may hesitate to give away fire on particular days or after certain events, fearing that luck, prosperity, or household fortune might leave with the flame. Some swear that lending fire after sunset invites misfortune. Others probably decide that frozen neighbours are worse luck. No one can quite agree whether these rules are deeply believed or simply repeated, because they have always been repeated. Tonight, fortunately, no one needs to test them. The fire survives. You extend one hand from beneath the blanket. The air immediately attacks it. You put it back. Wisdom arrives quickly at this hour. Outside, frost is likely forming across the lane roofs, fence rails, and frozen puddles. Inside an unheated or poorly heated medieval house, the temperature may fall sharply once the hearth weakens, especially in winter. Walls block wind, but they do not create warmth. Thatch can insulate reasonably well, yet drafts still enter around doors and openings, and damp makes everything worse. The cloak hanging near the fire remains slightly wet from your arrival hours ago. You can smell its woolly dampness whenever the flame grows. The old woman wakes next. She sits up, pulls the patched blanket around her shoulders and rubs her hands. Then she reaches for the small herb bundle near her bolster. Apparently, even Superstition gets cold. She mutters something about the weather. The householder replies that winter is meant to be cold. She tells him this does not make it polite. You agree silently. A clay vessel of water stands near the hearth. The woman checks it. Water kept indoors may become painfully cold overnight, but usually avoids the thicker freezing possible outside. She pours a little into a cup and drinks. Then she warms her hands above the new flame. You finally surrender and leave your blanket. The moment your feet touch the floor, every heroic idea you have ever had about medieval life disappears. The rushes are icy. You step quickly toward the hearth. The dog follows. Together you join the others in the small circle of growing warmth. No one speaks much. These are not conversational hours. You hold your palms toward the flame, turning them slowly as sensation returns. The house around you remains almost completely dark beyond the fire. A roof beam creaks. The wind whispers beneath the door. Someone coughs again. The bell has not sounded for a while, or perhaps you slept through it. Time has become vague. The woman adds one slightly thicker piece of wood. Flame curls around its edge. The room brightens enough for you to see breath misting faintly near the coldest part of the door. Yet close to the hearth, warmth begins rebuilding its little kingdom. One hand warms, then the other. The dog stretches beside your feet. The old woman pulls her blanket tighter. And all of you remain there, quietly guarding a few flames against the coldest hours of the medieval night. The dog stretches beside your feet, extends his front paws toward the hearth, and yawns with the solemn satisfaction of a creature who has successfully endured several hours of doing almost nothing. Then something heavy shifts behind the wall. A dull thump follows. The householder looks toward the darker end of the building. Another thump, then a long, slow snort. You remember that the human household is not the only one sheltering beneath this roof. In many medieval homes, especially smaller rural dwellings, animals live astonishingly close to people. Sometimes livestock occupy a separate byre attached to the house. Sometimes they are divided from the human living space by little more than timber hurdles or a low wall. The exact arrangement varies enormously by region, wealth, and period, but tonight the family's cow is close enough that you can hear her breathing. The householder rises reluctantly. Apparently, winter does not excuse livestock from having opinions. He takes a small rushlight, catches its end from the hearth, and gestures for you to follow. You wrap your blanket around your shoulders and cross the room. The dog follows too. Of course he does. A narrow wooden partition separates the warmer living area from the animals. When the householder opens it, a smell rolls toward you so confidently that there can be no confusion about what lies beyond. Hay, dung, leather, animal breath, old straw, and the thick, warm scent of a cow who has absolutely no concern for your standards of interior comfort. You step through. The space is dim, but the rushlight reveals a cow standing over a bed of straw. Her hide shines faintly where the tiny flame touches it. She turns her enormous head and regards you with the sleepy patience of someone who has seen many foolish travellers before. Nearby, a smaller animal shifts, a goat. It immediately reaches toward the edge of your blanket. You pull it away. The goat tries again. You now understand why medieval household inventories do not include blanket peacefully shared with goat. Livestock is precious. A cow can provide milk manure, hides labor calves, and considerable household security. Sheep offer wool and meat. Goats survive on rough grazing and provide milk. Chickens produce eggs. Pigs convert scraps and woodland forage into valuable food. Keeping animals close protects them from theft predators and severe weather. Their bodies also produce warmth. You notice that immediately. The byre is far from comfortable, but it is surprisingly less icy than the space near the front door. A large animal gives off considerable heat, and an attached livestock area may help soften the winter cold within the whole building. Warmth, however, arrives with conditions. The goat sneezes. The cow shifts her weight. Something wet lands in the straw. The conditions become clear. The householder checks a wooden manger and pushes a little hay toward the cow. Winter fodder has to be gathered months before it is needed. Haymaking during summer is therefore not merely another rural chore. It is preparation for whether animals live through the hungry season. Bundles of dried grass, straw leaves, and other fodder become precious once snow or frost limits grazing. A bad harvest can threaten animals as surely as people. The cow takes a mouthful and begins chewing, slowly, thoughtfully. You envy her ability to make dried grass appear relaxing. The dog noses around the straw until the goat lowers its head toward him. They stare at each other. The dog steps backward. Apparently, this is one household argument he prefers not to pursue. From somewhere overhead comes a flutter. You look up. Several chickens roost on a wooden perch beneath the darker rafters. One opens an eye, another rearranges itself, and immediately disturbs the bird beside it. A brief muttering of feathers follows. Chickens are often brought into protected places at night because foxes, martens, and thieves are perfectly capable of appreciating poultry. Roosting birds may occupy sheds, enclosed yards, byres, or portions of houses depending on local arrangements. They are useful. They are also incapable of moving quietly after midnight. One drops from the perch. It lands in the straw with a soft explosion. You nearly step backward into the goat. The goat looks delighted. The householder catches the chicken gently and places it back. He has clearly performed this ceremony before. Some rural customs attach signs and meanings to animal behavior. A cock crowing at an unusual hour might be interpreted as a warning. Dogs howling without visible cause can become omens. Livestock behaving strangely may be blamed on weather sickness, spirits, witches, or the evil eye. Some swear that horses can sense unseen visitors before humans do. Others notice that horses are startled by practically everything. No one can quite agree where ordinary animal nervousness ends and supernatural evidence begins. The cow suddenly turns her head toward the outside wall. Everyone pauses. You listen. Nothing. Then the dog growls softly. The householder lifts the rushlight. A faint scraping comes from beyond the wall. Your imagination unfortunately remembers every story the old woman told earlier. The scraping comes again. The dog moves closer to the door. Then a pig grunts from an enclosure outside. The householder relaxes. Apparently, the unseen visitor is merely hungry. You relax too. Naturally, you were never concerned. The pig receives no midnight meal. Instead, the householder checks the latch, securing the animal enclosure, and returns inside. You follow him back toward the hearth. The change in smell is remarkable. The smoky human room, which seemed unpleasant when you first entered, now feels almost fragrant. Perspective is a powerful thing. Near the grain chest, the cat sits washing one paw. You suddenly understand its importance much better. Cats protect stored food from mice and rat. Dogs warn of strangers and predators. Livestock supplies food fibers, manure, and labor. Poultry turns scraps and insects into eggs. Animals are not decorative companions here. They are part of the household economy. That does not prevent affection. The dog returns to your side immediately. The old woman, now awake, breaks the smallest crust from yesterday's bread and gives it to him despite claiming earlier that food must never be wasted. He eats it in one swallow. No one comments on the contradiction. The cat approaches next. It receives nothing. It appears unsurprised. You settle beside the fire again as the householder closes the partition. Through it you still hear the cow chewing. The goat bumps something. A chicken rustles above. The pig grunts outside. The dog circles twice before lying against your leg. The cat returns to the grain chest. Human beings may imagine that the medieval home belongs to them, but after midnight, the truth becomes harder to defend. The house is a shared shelter of breath fur feathers, straw wool, smoke, and warmth. Beyond the walls, winter waits. Inside, everything living crowds a little closer together, and then, from the far side of the hearth, someone begins coughing. At first, it is only one dry sound beneath a blanket, then another. then 3 in a row. The younger man sleeping near the wall rolls onto his side and pulls the wool higher around his shoulders. His face is barely visible in the firelight, but when the householder's wife leans toward him, you can see the dull shine of tired eyes, cold rooms, smoky air, damp clothing, hard labor, poor winter diets and close living quarters all make illness a familiar visitor here, not necessarily a dramatic one. Often sickness simply arrives quietly and stays. A sore throat, a fever, a painful tooth, a swollen joint, a cough that refuses to leave, a stomach made miserable by food-water exhaustion, or something nobody can identify. There is no physician waiting at the end of the lane. In a village like this, professional medical help may be distant, expensive, or entirely unavailable. Care begins at home, using knowledge passed through families, local healers, midwives, clergy, herbal traditions, and whatever remedies people trust enough to try. The older woman is already awake. Naturally, you begin to suspect she has been waiting all night for someone to require treatment. She rises from her pallet, wraps the patched blanket around her shoulders, and reaches toward the bundles hanging from the wall. One bundle comes down, then another. The householder watches with the expression of a man who knows resistance is pointless. She smells each one before choosing a handful of dried leaves, sage perhaps, maybe thyme. In the dimness, even the plants seem unwilling to identify themselves clearly. She crushes the leaves between her fingers and drops them into a small clay cup. The woman of the house pours in warmed water from near the hearth. Steam rises. The sick man sits slowly and drinks. Herbal infusions are common household remedies. Sage may be used for throats and digestion. Mint may settle the stomach. Fennel, chamomile, horehound, feverfew, and many other plants appear in treatments depending on place, season, and tradition. Some are genuinely useful, some are less convincing, and some depend heavily on how much faith you place in an elderly relative holding a spoon. The old woman appears to possess tremendous confidence. This seems to count as an ingredient. The man coughs again. She puts the back of her hand against his forehead. Then she declares him too warm. The householder says everyone beside the fire is too warm on one side and frozen on the other. She ignores him. The younger man is moved slightly away from the strongest heat and given another blanket. This seems contradictory until you remember that medieval care is often built from observation rather than modern understanding of infection or physiology. People notice patterns, inherit medical theories, and combine practical experience with ideas about bodily balance. Learned medicine may speak of the 4 humours: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is often imagined as balance among these substances and their associated qualities: too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. The human body viewed this way becomes something like an extremely temperamental stew. You decide not to mention this while pottage remains in recent memory. The old woman rummages through another bundle. This time she finds dried onion and a small piece of cloth. She warms the cloth near the hearth and places it around the man's neck. Warm compresses are simple enough and probably welcome regardless of theory. He closes his eyes. His shoulders loosen slightly. Then someone on the other side of the room groans. The householder looks over. The older woman turns immediately. Apparently, the night clinic is expanding. The householder himself has been rubbing his jaw. You noticed him doing it during supper, but assumed he was thinking. Now you realize a tooth is troubling him. Toothache is one of the more miserable companions of pre-modern life. Teeth wear down, cavities develop, gums become infected. Treatment varies from herbal preparations to pulling the offending tooth if pain becomes unbearable. You look at him sympathetically. He does not look interested in sympathy. The old woman offers a small, dried, clove-like object from a pouch. Imported spices such as cloves can be expensive and may not be available to every village household, but various aromatic plants, wine rinses, salt herbs and warming applications appear in folk remedies for tooth pain. This particular household seems to prefer something grown locally. She presses a crushed herb against his gum. He winces. The dog watches with great concern, or possibly hope that food is involved. Some medieval remedies become far stranger. Texts and folk traditions preserve cures involving charms, written words, animal substances, bloodletting, amulets, planetary timing, and ingredients that would make even the goat reconsider its appetite. Some swear that toothache can be eased by charms spoken on particular days. Others blame tiny toothworms believed to burrow inside the tooth, an idea that persists in different cultures for centuries. No one can quite agree whether everyone truly believes such explanations or whether old remedies simply survive because pain makes people willing to experiment. The householder mutters that his tooth contains no worm. The old woman says perhaps the worm is small. He has no answer to this. You almost laugh. Almost. The sick young man coughs again, softer this time. The woman adds honey to his drink. Honey is valuable, but it is also soothing, and its use in wounds and throat remedies has practical benefits that medieval people can observe even without knowing why. He drinks slowly. A small wooden box near the chest contains additional household medicines, strips of linen, dried herbs, perhaps a little grease or salve, and a few mysterious objects that you prefer not to inspect. In larger towns, apothecaries may sell prepared substances. Barber surgeons perform practical procedures. Physicians serve those who can afford them. Monasteries sometimes cultivate medicinal gardens and preserve medical knowledge in manuscripts. But here, at this hour, medicine consists mostly of warm water, wool, herbs, honey, observation memory, and patience. The old woman murmurs a short prayer to a saint associated locally with illness. Then she ties a thread loosely near the young man's wrist. You notice that nobody finds it odd to combine herb warmth, prayer, and charm to them. These belong to the same effort. Do everything that might help. Leave nothing useful untried. Even now it is hard to tell where medicine ends and belief begins, because the two often share the same cup. The younger man lies down again, his breathing settles. The householder stops rubbing his jaw, though whether the herb has helped or he has simply grown tired of touching it is impossible to know. The old woman returns the bundles to their hooks. The room becomes quiet once more. Smoke curls above the hearth. The dog lowers his head. Outside frost continues gathering in darkness. And inside this little house sickness has not vanished, but it has been answered in the only ways available: warmth, care, herbs, faith, and the stubborn refusal to let anyone suffer entirely alone. The stubborn refusal to let anyone suffer entirely alone seems comforting until someone knocks on the door. 3 heavy blows strike the oak. Everyone wakes. The dog is on his feet before you are fully upright, barking toward the darkness beyond the barred entrance. The cat vanishes behind the grain chest. Even the young man with the cough raises his head from the blanket. Nobody speaks for several breaths. The knock comes again. Not frantic, not gentle either. The householder reaches automatically for the knife hanging beside his belt. Outside, the village should be asleep. Anyone travelling this late has either been delayed, badly become lost, or chosen the darkness for reasons the people inside this house would very much like explained. The woman of the household feeds one thin stick into the hearth. A little flame rises. The old woman pulls her blanket around her shoulders and murmurs something that might be a prayer, or perhaps an opinion about people who knock after midnight. The householder approaches the door without removing the wooden bar. "Who is there?" he calls. A muffled voice answers through the oak. You catch only fragments. Road, abbey, rain. 2 travellers. The dog continues barking. One of the animals in the adjoining byre shifts heavily as if it too would like clarification. Travel after dark is dangerous enough that most people prefer to reach shelter before sunset. Roads are uneven, bridges can be uncertain, forests difficult to navigate, and mud capable of turning an ordinary journey into a long argument between boots and earth. Then there are human dangers: thieves, drunken troublemakers, deserters, men who insist they are merely humble travellers while carrying an impressive number of knives. The householder asks another question. The voice outside answers that they are pilgrims. This changes the mood, though not completely. Pilgrims are familiar figures on medieval roads. They travel toward shrines, churches, saints' tombs, and holy places, sometimes covering extraordinary distances on foot. Clothing may carry signs of their destination: scallop shells associated with Santiago, little metal badges bought near shrines, staffs, scripts, crosses, or other tokens. A pilgrim badge can be devotional souvenir, proof of travel protection status, symbol, and occasionally the medieval equivalent of saying, "I really have been somewhere interesting." It is also possible to acquire one without being especially holy, The householder knows this. He lifts the bar only after telling everyone else to stand back. The door opens the width of a hand. Cold air slices into the room. Beyond it stand two men under dripping cloaks. One is older, grey-bearded, and stooped beneath a pack. The other is perhaps 30, with mud reaching halfway up his legs. Both carry staffs. A small metal badge glints on the older traveller's hat. The woman brings the rushlight closer. It appears to show a saint, possibly. Medieval badges can be tiny and badly worn, and this one has endured enough rain to make sainthood difficult to identify. The older traveller says they have come from a shrine several days away and lost the road after crossing the river. The householder studies them. The dog studies them harder. The younger pilgrim smells of rain, horse, and wet wool even from several steps away. You realize you smelled exactly the same when you arrived. This does not improve your confidence in strangers. Hospitality is a serious moral expectation, particularly toward pilgrims, the poor, and travellers in need. Monasteries maintain guest houses. Inns serve those able to pay. Wealthy households may receive visitors according to rank and connection, but poor families have limited food, limited bedding, and limited patience for surprise guests after dark. Turning travellers away on a freezing night can feel cruel. Inviting thieves into your house can feel worse. Some swear that Christ or a saint may travel disguised as a poor stranger to test a household's generosity. Other people presumably notice that thieves are also capable of wearing cloaks. No one can quite agree how much hospitality should triumph over common sense. The householder settles on a compromise. The men may enter. Their staffs stay near the door. The younger traveller visibly dislikes this condition. That does not help him. They step inside. The door closes quickly. The bar drops back into place. Immediately everyone relaxes by perhaps 5%. Wet cloaks are removed and placed near the fire. The older pilgrim opens his hands deliberately, showing that he carries no weapon there. His companion has a small utility knife at his belt, which is normal enough for a traveller. The dog sniffs both men. The older one earns a wag. The younger earns prolonged suspicion. You decide the dog should perhaps sit on a manor court. His standards are clearer than most legal proceedings. The woman pours a little warm water into 2 bowls and gives each traveller a crust of bread. There is no feast. Hospitality does not create food from nothing. The remaining loaf must survive tomorrow. A little pottage still clings to the cooking pot, so water is added, the mixture is warmed, and the 2 men receive something halfway between soup and a memory of supper. They eat gratefully, or at least the older man does. The younger man looks into his bowl as though hoping additional ingredients might rise from the bottom. None do. This household has already performed its miracle. Conversation begins quietly. The travellers bring news. A bridge downstream has partly washed out. A merchant's cart overturned near the forest. There has been an argument over market tolls in the neighbouring town. A priest at the shrine has apparently displayed a relic said to be a piece of a saint's shoe. The old woman becomes interested immediately. The householder asks how anyone knows it is the saint's shoe. The pilgrim says the priest told them. This answer satisfies almost nobody. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether medieval relic stories reveal unquestioning faith, commercial enthusiasm, local pride, or all three at once. The older pilgrim then produces another badge. This one is shaped more clearly, stamped from cheap metal and pierced so it can be attached to clothing. The old woman examines it reverently. The householder examines it economically. You suspect he is calculating how much the traveller paid. Pilgrim badges can be bought at major shrines and carried home as physical reminders of sacred journeys. Some are touched to relics or holy places, giving them additional devotional meaning. The traveller says this badge has touched the saint's shrine. The old woman immediately approves. The householder glances toward the suspicious fragment hanging near his own wall. Apparently, tonight has become a competitive market in uncertain holiness. The fire is fed one more small piece of wood. Sleeping arrangements now become difficult. There are already too many bodies for too little floor. The two pilgrims are given a patch of rushes near the wall and one spare wool covering between them. No one complains openly. The younger man nearly does. The older traveller looks at him once. That ends it. Staffs remain beside the door. Packs remain close to their owners. The iron key stays at the woman's belt. The householder sleeps nearer the strangers than before. Hospitality has been granted, but trust will wait until daylight. You settle beneath your blanket again. The dog lies between you and the younger pilgrim. Outside frost thickens on the road they have escaped. Inside, wet wool steams beside the hearth, while two more breaths join the crowded room. The medieval night has grown smaller again, stretched to make space for strangers. And beneath the barred oak door, cold air continues slipping quietly around everyone alike. Cold air continues slipping beneath the barred oak door, but before anyone can fully settle again, the weather changes. At first you hear only a deeper movement in the wind, then rain strikes the roof. Not a gentle patter. A hard, sudden drumming begins above you, spreading across the thatch from one end of the house to the other. The sound is so loud that the younger pilgrim lifts his head immediately. Another gust presses against the wall. The entire structure gives a long wooden groan. Nobody panics. This is reassuring. Nobody looks especially pleased either. The householder sits up. Rain in a medieval home is not merely weather outside. It is an inspection. Every weakness in the roof is about to be tested. The first drop falls beside the oak chest. Plink. Everyone looks toward it. The bowl already positioned beneath the older leak remains dry. This is a new one, the householder mutters. Apparently the roof has decided to diversify. His wife rises and places a second clay bowl beneath the drip. Another drop lands, then another. The thatched roof above you consists of tightly layered bundles of straw reeds or similar plant material arranged so that water should run downward and outward. Good thatch can protect a house surprisingly well, but it requires maintenance. Birds pull at it, wind loosens it, moisture encourages decay. Heavy rain finds thin places. And tonight, the rain is extremely motivated. The dog retreats from the doorway as water begins creeping beneath it. You help the householder push a rolled piece of old cloth against the gap. The cloth darkens immediately. It works. Mostly. A little water still finds its way around one edge. You add another scrap. Medieval flood defense has now become several old rags and determination. The younger pilgrim stands and offers to help. The householder hands him a bucket. Trust apparently improves rapidly when the roof starts leaking. A stronger gust shakes the shutter. The wooden fastening holds. Then comes a rapid tapping near the rear wall. The householder's wife moves toward it and finds moisture appearing along a cracked patch of daub. She presses her fingers against the wall. Cold water beads between them. Wattle and daub walls can endure for years when properly maintained, but they need repair. Wooden woven strips form the underlying structure, while mixtures of clay, earth, straw, dung, or other local materials create the wall surface. Cracks are patched, surfaces are renewed, weather is negotiated with repeatedly. Tonight the negotiation is becoming heated. The old woman points toward a small sack stored near the wall. It contains grain. The woman moves it immediately. Stored food must stay dry. Grain exposed to damp can spoil mold or become useless, and in a household living through winter, losing even part of a store can matter greatly. The sacks are lifted onto the oak chest. The cat objects to losing its position there. It jumps down with an expression suggesting the family has misunderstood ownership law. The goat thumps against the partition. Then the cow gives a low call. The animals dislike the storm. You can hear rain beating over their section of the roof as well. The householder checks the partition and finds a thin trickle running toward the straw bedding. Now everyone moves. Old dry straw is precious, so the wettest portion is pulled aside while a small ridge of packed material is built to redirect the water. The cow watches. The goat tries to eat the ridge. This is not helpful. The dog barks at the goat. The goat ignores the criticism. For several minutes the house is full of quiet activity. Bowls are moved. Cloth is stuffed into gaps. A basket is shifted from beneath a leak. Firewood is pulled farther from the damp wall. The pilgrims protect their packs. The older woman guards the household herb bundles as if they contain the crown jewels. Perhaps to her they nearly do. The rain grows heavier. Water now streams from the roof edges outside. You hear it splashing into mud beside the walls. Then a flash of distant lightning briefly shows through a crack around the shutter. The room turns pale for less than a heartbeat. A low rumble follows. Thunder. The old woman crosses herself. The younger pilgrim does the same. Medieval explanations for storms can mingle natural observation with religious and folk belief. Bells may sometimes be rung during storms in the hope of driving away dangerous weather or spiritual forces associated with it. Certain saints are invoked for protection. Blessed objects may be placed near doors or windows. Some swear that particular herbs protect houses from lightning. Others insist that loud church bells break storms apart. No one can quite agree whether such customs arise from faith, older superstition, or the perfectly understandable desire to do something when the sky seems angry. The old woman reaches toward the shelf and retrieves the questionable relic. Of course she does. The householder watches her hold it toward the roof. He says nothing. Perhaps this is wisdom. Another rumble crosses the village. Far away a bell begins sounding, slow, heavy, repeated. You listen through the rain. Whether someone at the church is warning villagers, marking prayer, or deliberately ringing against the storm is impossible to know from inside the house. Even now it is hard to tell whether every bell heard during bad weather carries practical purpose, spiritual protection, or simply habit. But its sound feels steady. The storm does not. A gust drives smoke downward from the hearth. Everyone coughs. The fire flares, then leans sharply. The woman immediately checks the sparks. Fire remains dangerous even while rain is pouring outside. The roof may be wet on top and dry beneath, while rushes, wood wool, and stored fodder remain vulnerable to stray embers. The householder dampens one glowing fragment that has landed too close to the wall. Steam rises. You realize the absurd balance of the night. Too much water is threatening the food. Too much fire could threaten the house. Too little fire will freeze everyone. Medieval comfort appears to involve keeping several disasters politely separated. The rain continues for what feels like an hour. Then gradually the drumming softens, thunder moves farther away, the bell stops, water still falls into the bowls. Plink, pause, plink. The house remains standing, the grain is dry, the fire still lives, the animals settle. The pilgrims return to their blankets. The old woman carefully replaces the relic on its shelf with the satisfied expression of someone willing to accept full credit for the improvement in weather. Nobody challenges her. You sit beside the hearth, listening to rainwater slide from the thatch into the darkness outside. The walls are damp. The floor is messier. 3 bowls now catch leaks, but the roof remains above you, and in a medieval winter night, that is victory enough. The victory is modest, but it is enough to let the house become quiet again. For a while only the dripping remains. Plink, pause, plink. You lie beneath your wool covering and listen as the rain retreats farther across the fields. The storm has left the air colder, but something subtle has changed beyond the shutter. The darkness no longer feels endless. You cannot see dawn yet, but the house seems to sense it. The cow shifts in the adjoining byre. One chicken rustles on its perch, then another. The dog lifts his head before settling again. Somewhere far outside a cock crows once. It is much too early, or Perhaps it only feels that way. People sometimes imagine the medieval countryside waking neatly at sunrise with every rooster performing exactly on schedule and every villager rising cheerfully into golden light. The rooster outside tries again. Judging by the groan from the householder, the arrangement is less poetic in practice. You sit up slowly. Your back complains about the straw mattress. Your neck has developed strong opinions about the folded sleeve you used as a pillow. The old woman is already awake. Naturally, she kneels beside the hearth and pushes ash aside with the iron poker. Beneath it several embers glow steadily. The careful work of the night has succeeded. She adds dry shavings, a little smoke rises, then a flame. The householder's wife appears beside her and feeds the fire with thin sticks before adding a thicker piece of wood. Soon the hearth begins to brighten. The first task of morning is often not some grand beginning, but the revival of yesterday's fire. Heat must return before water can be warmed, food prepared, wet clothing dried, and stiff fingers persuaded to become useful again. You hold your hands toward the growing flame. The younger pilgrim wakes and immediately does the same. Neither of you speaks. There is a universal agreement that conversation should wait until fingers work. The householder rises next. He checks the bowls beneath the roof leaks. One is nearly half full. He carries it outside, lifting the oak bar just enough to slip through the door. A blade of grey light appears around the opening. It is faint, cold, but unmistakable. Morning is coming. When he returns, his boots carry fresh mud. The floor had only just begun recovering from yesterday. The rushes accept their fate. The woman brings the clay pot back over the fire. Yesterday's pottage has thickened into something nearly solid. She adds water and stirs. The transformation is not glamorous, but it is efficient. Food left from the evening can become breakfast with a little heat and patience. Coarse bread is brought from its protected place, inspected for mice, and judged acceptable. The cat watches this examination closely, perhaps offended that suspicion has fallen on its professional responsibilities. A loaf like this does not need to be soft to be useful. Slices are broken off and dipped into warm pottage or ale. Hard crust can be softened near the fire. Nothing is discarded simply because it has passed the brief moment modern people might describe as fresh. You receive a piece. It resists your first attempt to tear it. You try again. Eventually the bread accepts reality. A jug of ale appears. Morning ale is not necessarily a celebration. Small beer or weak ale can be ordinary nourishment, especially where grain forms so much of the diet. You drink cautiously. It tastes exactly as you remember. Your medieval palate has not improved overnight. Still, it is filling. The older pilgrim wakes and gives quiet thanks for the shelter. His companion remains wrapped in the shared blanket until the householder clears his throat. The younger man opens one eye. Apparently, pilgrimage does not eliminate the temptation to stay in bed. The animals, however, are less patient. The cow calls again. The goat begins knocking against the partition. A chicken flutters down from its perch and immediately starts searching the floor. The householder carries hay into the byre. You follow mostly because the movement feels warmer than sitting still. The cow lowers her head into the manger. The goat attempts to inspect your sleeve. You move it away before history repeats itself. Outside the building, another rooster crows. This time, 2 more answer. The village is waking in fragments. No single sound announces morning. Instead, life accumulates. A door opens somewhere along the lane. A bucket strikes stone. Someone coughs outside. A cart wheel creaks. Then comes the faintest metallic ringing from far beyond the houses, the monastery bell. One note, then another. The sound travels differently in the early morning air, clear and thin after the storm. You stand near the byre entrance and listen. Bells help organize medieval time in ways that clocks rarely do for ordinary villagers. They summon monks to prayer, mark services warn of danger, announce deaths or celebrations, and give rural communities a shared sense of passing hours. Their exact meanings depend on place and custom. Some swear they can identify every bell by sound alone. Others probably simply know that when one particular bell rings, it is time to stop pretending they are asleep. The householder clearly belongs to the second group. Back inside, the women begin folding bedding. Straw mattresses are pushed back toward the wall. Blankets are shaken out. The older woman checks her lavender sprig and ties it again near the bolster. The suspicious relic remains safely on its shelf, having apparently protected everyone from storm fever thieves and questionable roofing. No one can quite agree whether it deserves any credit. The old woman appears certain, the householder appears committed to peace. The pilgrims begin preparing to leave. Their damp cloaks are warmer now, though not fully dry. The older man fastens his pilgrim badge to his hat. The younger one checks his pack twice. The staffs are returned from beside the door. Hospitality has reached its natural end. The woman gives each traveller a small piece of bread for the road. It is not much. It may matter greatly by midday. You pull on your own boots. They are still damp inside. The sensation is immediate and deeply disappointing. The dog watches you struggle with the second one. He has spent part of the night sleeping on it and appears satisfied with his contribution. The hearth burns brighter now. Steam rises from the pot. The room reveals itself gradually as pale light begins slipping through the opened shutter. You see everything daylight had hidden from you during the night: rumpled rushes, damp patches on the wall, muddy footprints, sleeping pallets, smoke-stained beams, hanging onions, clay bowls catching the last drops from the roof. Nothing looks magical. Everything looks used, lived in, necessary. Another bell sounds. This time the householder moves toward the door. The wooden bar lifts. Cold grey dawn spills into the room. Beyond it lies the muddy lane, washed clean in places by the storm and ruined in others. The village is waking, and after a night measured by fire bells, coughing animals, rain, strangers, and cold, the household begins quietly becoming a place of work once more. Cold grey dawn spills through the open doorway, and for several breaths you remain where you are. One hand resting against the rough oak frame. The world outside has returned. After spending so many hours enclosed by firelight, smoke, wool, and darkness, the village seems strangely large. Mist hangs above the lane, rainwater shines in deep cart ruts, and thin frost has formed along the edges where the storm water has already begun to freeze. Thatched roofs emerge one by one from the pale morning haze. Smoke rises from several cottages almost straight at first, before the breeze catches it. Someone farther down the lane carries 2 wooden buckets toward the well. A man leads a sleepy horse from a shelter. Another household has opened its shutters. The monastery bell continues beyond the fields. You step outside, your damp boots sink immediately into mud. There it is. The medieval morning greeting you remember. No trumpets, no heroic sunrise, just mud. The dog squeezes through the doorway behind you and trots into the lane, nose lowered, to investigate everything the storm has rearranged. Behind you, the household is already moving faster. Blankets are being folded. The pot is being scraped. The cow needs tending. Water must be fetched. The leaking roof will need inspection when enough daylight arrives. A section of daub damaged by rain should be patched. Wet straw must be replaced. Yesterday's problems have survived into morning with admirable determination. Daily life here rarely offers a clean ending. Night becomes morning, and morning becomes work. You turn back toward the house. In daylight it looks smaller than it felt during the night. The walls lean slightly. The thatch is thick but uneven. The oak door bears scratches near its lower edge, probably from years of dogs asking to be admitted. Nothing about the building suggests romance, yet you now know how much life fits inside. You know which part of the floor is coldest. You know where smoke gathers. You know the grain chest has a mouse problem. You know the goat considers wool blankets edible. You know the old woman owns a relic nobody entirely trusts and has complete confidence in it anyway. You know the householder complains about remedies until his tooth hurts enough, and you know his wife can rebuild a dying fire while everyone else remains under blankets offering highly unnecessary advice. The older pilgrim emerges next. His cloak is still damp around the hem. He tightens the cord at his neck and looks toward the road leading beyond the village. His younger companion follows more slowly, carrying both staffs for a moment before passing one back. They thank the family again. The householder gives directions toward the safer crossing after the storm. The older pilgrim listens carefully. The younger man looks toward the sky. You suspect he is mostly wondering whether breakfast might somehow happen twice. It does not. The 2 men leave. Their boots make soft sucking sounds in the mud until the mist begins swallowing them. The old woman watches from the doorway. Some swear that a traveller leaving a house should be given a blessing, so that whatever luck he carries does not turn against him on the road. Other households have customs about which foot crosses a threshold first, what words should be spoken at departure, or whether certain signs seen in the morning predict a successful journey. No one can quite agree where practical habit ends and superstition begins. The old woman raises one hand anyway. The pilgrims disappear. A cart starts moving somewhere near the edge of the village. Its wheels squeaks with every rotation. You remember hearing another cart during your arrival last evening, shortly before darkness closed around the house. It feels much longer ago. The monastery bell stops for the first time. Daylight itself begins measuring the hour. Thin sunlight presses through the cloud. The wet fields beyond the cottages turn silver. A woman scatters grain for chickens. Someone opens a barn door. The smell of wood smoke mixes with wet earth, manure bread, and cold air. You look once more into the house. Without darkness, the mysterious corners have become ordinary again. The oak chest is simply a chest. The herbs are simply herbs. The iron near the hearth is only iron, unless you ask the old woman. The shapes that seemed uncertain at midnight are revealed as baskets, tools, clothing, and cracked plaster. But the night has shown you something daylight hides. A medieval home after sunset is not merely a place where people sleep. It is a small world protecting itself. Fire is guarded, food is counted, doors are barred, animals are sheltered, sick people are tended, travellers are judged and sometimes welcomed, stories are told, prayers are whispered. Old customs survive because someone remembers them, and beneath rough wool blankets people listen to exactly the same wind that moves through the village this morning. You pull your fur-lined cloak closer. It still smells faintly of smoke. The dog returns from the lane and sits beside you. For a moment, neither of you moves. Then the household door begins to close. You step away from the threshold. Morning has fully arrived. You walk slowly along the muddy lane as pale light spreads across the roofs behind you. Your boots make soft, steady sounds in the wet earth, and the little house gradually disappears into river mist. The smoke from its hearth remains visible longest, a thin grey thread rising into the winter sky, and somewhere beneath that roof the family continues into another ordinary medieval day. The road ahead becomes quieter now, your steps slow. The bells are distant again, softer than before, drifting across fields where frost still shines along the hedges. Behind you the house is warm in memory, the heavy wool blanket, the red embers beneath ash, the dog curled beside your boots, the faint scent of lavender crushed beneath an old woman's fingers. All of it grows still. The muddy road fades, the village roofs soften into the mist. Even the cold seems less sharp now, as though morning itself has placed a blanket over the countryside. You no longer need to follow the road anywhere. There is no gate you must reach, no market waiting, no bell demanding that you rise. You can simply imagine that little hearth once more glowing gently in the darkness. The flames are low, the oak door is secure. Rain no longer touches the roof. Inside, everyone has found a place beneath wool and fur, close enough to warmth, close enough to one another. The cow is quiet. The chickens are still. The cat keeps watch near the grain chest. Even the mouse seems to understand that the night has gone on long enough. Your breathing becomes slower. The medieval world settles around you without asking anything more. Smoke drifts upward. A final ember glows beneath ash. Somewhere beyond the walls a bell sounds once and then disappears into the distance. You let the sound go. You let the road go. You let the old house, the wet fields, the winter wind, and the quiet village fade gently into darkness. Everything that needed shelter has found it. Everything that needed warmth rests near the fire. And you can rest too. The night is calm now. The door is barred. The blankets are warm. The hearth is still alive. And there is nothing left for you to do except close your eyes and sleep.